I interacted with him a few times, but I preferred to give him his space. And so I was not one of his, I was not an hourist, I'm still not an hourist. I admired him from a distance. I moved in and out of his politics, of his political activities at my own choice, at my own convenience. Always viewing, especially at that time, politicians with great suspicion, no matter how much I admired them. And so during crisis, I sought him out, and of course he always received me. And we would have, very frank discussion. I remember when he came out of prison, we had an interesting conversation in his office, and that was the very day when I went to talk to him about the question mark on his accepting a position on the door. And I looked at his desk. I said to him, so this, even you don't know the history of this desk. And then I narrated to him how we slept under it. It was a very huge desk with lots of space there. We were protecting the clandestine, well, not clandestine really, but the Biafran radio, the eastern region at that time, the radio Enugu, which was brought from the east to record and transmit the correct results of a certain election. And so we took positions the police were looking for it everywhere, but they didn't know it was at a place they last suspected, right inside Awolowo's house. And so we rotated protecting the place anyway. And there were a couple of nights when I actually slept under that desk. And so I mentioned that to him. The foremost nationalists who brought independence about, with his colleagues like Nnamdi Azikiwe, Abatmacaulay, of course, blazed the trail much and Mbolo Ojike, one of the pioneers. He, of course, had the clearest idea, in my view, of the direction in which the nation should go. In other words, he was a planner, he was a visionary. And so I mention this only to emphasize the fact that long before independence, a certain strong cleavage had begun between certain elements who were considered conservative, and these were mostly regarded as being in the former feudal north, and the radicals, shall we say, the progressives, were considered the south. But of course the British had inserted what I consider the seeds of self-destruct even before they left. They falsified not just the first elections, they falsified even the census, this most egregious form of legacy to leave behind. And so there was always a dispute. Incidentally, I'm not just saying this, this fact's been coming out in the memoirs of the former colonial officers like Harold Smith, who were ordered to falsify the figures and so on. So the independence was obtained on a very false basis. There's no doubt about in my mind is that Awolowo was not involved in any real militancy. I'm sure, considering the violence that was unleashed on the opposition when they went to campaign in certain parts of the country, the north most especially, that he could have agreed to the kind of cadre training, in a radical country like Ghana then was. That's possible. But I honestly do not believe he was ever involved in any plot to overthrow the government. But that is what was he was accused of, treasonable felony, was a technical expression. There was a resolve to get rid of him and his fellow progressives, backed by the British, incidentally. The British were not comfortable about the more radical, politically radical South. So I consider his own instance a miscarriage of justice. And that might have applied across the board. I don't know. Awolowo did not want war to take place. I know this personally from him. He did not want conflict to engulf the land of the West. And for me, this is a very pragmatic and very reasonable attitude to take, because the West was not militarily prepared and was not represented really in the army. The army, and look at all the memoirs of many of the both combatants and the regular soldiers. The southern population, shall we say, of the army was treated like a second-class citizen. There's no question at all about it. And the the Yoruba, definitely the West was very poorly represented there. I use the expression, and others did at the time, that we were really an occupied territory, occupied, under an army of occupation. And for those pragmatic reasons, Awolowo did not want war to take place here. And he made strenuous effort to prevent the secession. The records are coming out every day. And I can bear witness to it as narrated in my Ibadan Nkelemes years. I did meet Awolowo and asked him, are you sure you want to? You've been invited to take part in the government of General Gowon. You realize that if you take part, this will endorse the militarist attitude of the government. And he gave me this explanation that he did not want this to be a battleground for the simple reason that the West was not militarily prepared. There was no match at all. And he told me discussions we did had with Ojukwu, and much of this has been corroborated by many others who were present at that meeting. So I consider his position as that of somebody who, because of a situation of force majeure, political force majeure, realized that he had to go to play the role then of not quite the father figure, but the cohesive force for Afro-Nigerian, for the Nigerian nation. And he did everything that he could to be that cohesive force, including accepting this position under the military regime of Yakubu Gowon.
Because Gowon wooed him.
As a politician, he was a pragmatist, and he was a leader. He was a political leader. He was very conscious of his role, very conscious of his role in history. His place would be in history. So I wouldn't say that he felt compelled to do it. He could have chosen not to. He refused to be a member of the Constitutional Committee, Constitutional Assembly, if you remember. And so he wasn't bothered about that. But he just felt that the time, and again, it's a matter of opinion, of judgment. Just felt that it was the correct thing for him to do at that particular time. Yes, Ojukwu used that expression without acknowledging that he was borrowing it from somebody else. I forget which statesman described another leader as the greatest president that nation ever had. But I just point that out because everybody keeps saying Ojukwu said this, Ojukwu said that, as if he invented the expression. No, he did not. He didn't acknowledge it. But now to take it as, I would agree 100% with Ojukwu. Awolowo was the greatest president that Nigeria never had. He was a visionary, he was a pragmatist, he was a brilliant economist who actually succeeded in guiding financially the country through war without borrowing money from outside. He was meticulous. He was a meticulous individual. So whether you're talking about culturally, and he was very cultured. He believed very much in the cultures, in the arts. He was also, his openness to religious choices was unquestioned. He was a Christian, a very devout Christian, and yet he started a pilgrims board for Muslims. In fact, for me, that was a great error, because I think governments should never involve themselves in any kind of religious undertaking, organization, no matter what religion. The two should be kept separate. Otherwise, they become more demand, more demand. Any religion can get up anytime and say, you did this for that religion, therefore you must do it for this religion. So I disagree with him very fervently about that. But the important thing was his state of mind, that this is somebody who felt that religious pluralism and tolerance and acceptance was important for a nation. And he put his money where his mouth was. He actually started this pilgrim assistance for a religion that was not his. So whichever level you want to look at it. And again, all you have to do is compare him to the sequence of leaders this country has ever had. And I'm sorry, but mostly they are pygmies beside the giant statue.
And I believe that he was an extraordinary person. He was a man of destiny, and he recognized that he was in tune with his maker, the Holy Spirit, if you like, and he knew exactly what his mission was in life, and he had enough obedience to stay with that mission no matter what, and he fulfilled the mission. He knew exactly what he was here to do, and he did it faithfully. And I think the reward is what we are seeing now, 25 years after he left us. The fascination, the interest is even more now than ever before in what he did.